Now recording. So, our objective for today's class is to continue on with databases. We will do perhaps a bit more chunky an example, get some actual CRUD operations operating, and if we're feeling good about all of that, we might even talk about SQL injection attacks. SQL injection attacks are very important. So, any questions before we get started? This was the class that I did have the the demo of assignment 3 I showed you guys, right?
Yeah.
So, if you, just on the subject of assignment 3, if you go to my personal CS Unix account, CS Unix home or public, don't know, 10260/A3, there you go. You get L-System and Conway. So those are the two examples that we had last time. I renamed the files to index.html so that they kind of load automatically, but aside from that, there you go. It's running on CS Unix now. You can play with it if you want. So, can I make a recommendation for when you're working on this one? It's quite easy on your local copy in the JavaScript to change how big these pixels are. So when you're debugging the Conway code, I highly recommend changing it so that the pixels are like maybe even like 100 pixels across. As long as it's something divisible, as long as it evenly divides 100, it'll work evenly. But if you make the pixels big pixels and use the single step, then you will have a better and easier time checking to see if your logic is working correctly. Make sense? So that's my recommendation. Good. So, we shall continue on with our databasing application. Yes?
Have you ever seen what happens when you type in CS Unix ~more?
Yes.
Okay.
I wrote that
Did
page.
you create that? Oh.
Yeah.
I thought someone was trolling you.
No, that was me. I was trolling myself for the purposes of the class.
Is that you and AI as Buzz Lightyear?
Buzz Lightyear, come on.
You look like Buzz Lightyear.
That's Thanos, man. Yeah, you know why? Because I snap my fingers and half of you pass and half of you fail. Yeah. So yeah, no, that was like way back, that's, I just haven't. I haven't done anything with it yet. I need to clean up my CS Unix. Whatever. Moving on. But yeah, that particular image was a gift to me by one of my old TAs at McMaster. As is the little like cowboy Nick, who's my my profile icon.
So you didn't actually dress up like a cowboy?
I didn't actually no, I've never actually been at a cowboy ranch. Yeah, I'm not a cowboy. I was merely wearing the hat in a picture. So, first things first, if we are going to perform some database operations, we need some data to operate on. There is an SQL file in the announcements feed on Canvas. I almost called it Avenue. My Canvas, there we go. Bing, bang, boom. So if you take a look at server-side web programming, announcements, there we go. There is an announcement that's like the second one down, a little SQL for your Wednesday. if you click there, grab the file, grab a copy of the file, download it please, and save it. We will use that to populate our database from XAMPP.
Does that need to go into htdocs?
No. Surprisingly, no. The SQL file does not need to go into htdocs because basically we will be performing a web interface file upload to load the SQL into the SQL server. Also, htdocs is just for the web server. It doesn't touch the SQL server.
Where would you store something like this?
Any temporary directory, any working directory where you put stuff that you work on. It doesn't have to be anywhere specific. Any other questions? Good. So please fire up XAMPP if you haven't done so already through Mohawk Apps or if you have it locally installed. Question at the back.
Will this work on the Mac?
Yes. The reason that I use XAMPP for this class instead of WAMP is because the X means cross-platform. So XAMPP is cross-compatible to Windows, Linux, and Mac.
I only asked if SQL is
SQL doesn't work with your Mac? You mean like for the databases course? Yeah, this should be fine. It's not using that program, so it should not be a problem. Let me know if it is a problem, but I don't think it should be a problem. So, the way that you upload is to access phpMyAdmin on localhost. Localhost, phpMyAdmin. Ba-boom. So, you will need to create a new database.
Bless you.
Almost. Oh, it went away. I was going to sneeze, but then I didn't sneeze. I apologize. So, make a new database. Call it what you like. Ha ha ha. Create it. Next, we want to import the SQL file that you downloaded just recently. Now, you can choose file, use your file explorer interface, find the file and slot it in, but the simplest and easiest way to do this is to go to your downloads. Drag and drop it. That automatically applies it, and it executes it too. Convenient. So if you take a look at your database, you shall now see we have our video games table. This is the data from a different class, not our class. So, sorry, I didn't save it. But you can see I still got my personal favorite in there. So, now we have data in the database. Our objective is to get the data out of the database and into a website. Yes? So, the way that I got all of this in here, I downloaded the .sql file from the announcements feed on Canvas, pardon me. And then I used the import tab. All you have to do is drag and drop the file into it, and it should work. Does that work? All good? Good. So, next, load up your favorite code editor. create a new directory inside of your htdocs folder for a new PHP script. Let's call this database.php. There we go. So far, so good. So, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new instance of the PHP data object, PDO. I will underscore and highlight the PDO is the only acceptable way of connecting to an SQL database in this course. There are other older ways of doing it, which are not current security practice. So, if you want your website to be as safe as possible, you need to do it the way I'm doing it in class, okay? There is a traditional problem with artificially generated code. The base of data that the AI uses to create its code is often old, right? Tutorials that go back 10, 15 years even, maybe even 20 years. The AI doesn't know what current security practice is. It may give you solutions that are incorrect in terms of current security practice. So, be careful when or if you decide to use such things. Do it the way we've done it in class. Okay? So, we create the new database handle. New PDO. We then require a few arguments. But the PDO object generates exceptions if it fails to connect to the database. Right? From the crowd, what are some reasons you might not be able to connect to a database?
Wrong username.
Eh?
Wrong username.
Wrong username?
Bad number.
Yeah, bad network. Yep, the packets can just be dropped, and it's not your fault. It just sometimes happens. Bad login credentials. Yes.
Maybe too many requests.
Too many requests. Sure. Yeah, like on the server's end, if you're getting like a DDoS attack or something, that can also be a problem. So when it comes to error handling on the PDO, it can fail for no reason, and it can definitely not be your fault, but you still have to handle it, right? And the way that it chooses to fail is by generating an exception. Now, exceptions in PHP work pretty much exactly the way that they work in Java, right? You've got try and catch, in braces, exception, E. In our case, because everything we want to do here is using the database, if we fail to connect to the database, that's a good enough reason to just terminate the whole program, right? So, this should look strongly like Java. Someone, at some point, put this into PHP, I think around version 5. They liked Java so much that they put it in such a way that we have like one of our we almost never see this in PHP, but look, Is that a type being declared? PHP has a type declaration? It's like, yes, but only on sockets. So we create the exception handling apparatus. The next thing we need to do is to provide to the PDO object the information necessary to find and connect to the database. Now, let us recall, both for XAMPP and for CS Unix, where is the database, where is the SQL database relative to the web server? Where are the two of them located? On the same machine, that's right. So, when our client connects to a web server that's on the same machine, it does so through localhost. When the web server connects to an SQL database that's on the same machine, it connects to it through localhost. Very good. The first argument has to have its string formatted in a particular way. I recommend looking this up in the notes. Like, a thing I often recommend to students when you're learning a new language or you're learning a programming language, a thing that you should probably do is you should make yourself a quick reference sheet, right, of things that are difficult to remember but that you will require a few times. Just write them down on your quick reference sheet. Post that up inside of your desk space in your room or wherever it is that you do most of your programming, if you have a particular fixed space in which to do that. And make that yourself. Don't have the AI generate it because condensing the information from your brain onto the sheet is very good studying, right? But the particular manner of the connection to the PDO object, that is definitely something that I would put on a quick reference sheet. So, here you have it. So we have MySQL :host is equal to localhost, semicolon, DB name is equal to, and then you want to change this capitalized portion of the string. This should be the name that you gave the database in phpMyAdmin. Note, we're connecting to a database, not to a table. Right? So, whatever you wrote down for your database name, put that here. It's okay if you have to look it up. In fact, you might consider that a good idea, just so you get the spelling right. There you go. Any questions so far? Yeah. Oh, easily enough. So in phpMyAdmin, once you've got the database created and selected, if you click the Import tab, and then you simply drag and drop the SQL file into this pane, it will automatically load it for you. Yep. You have to have a database though first. So, any other questions? All good? So far so good? Okay. So, if we manage to make it through that without having flunked out on the exception, our connection was successful. So, let's test this code to see if it works. Oh wait, it won't because I forgot something. So, the second and third arguments to the PDO constructor are the login username and password that you will provide to the database. Now, CS Unix, the passwords are different, and the usernames are the same as your general CS Unix username. But on XAMPP, the login credentials are the same for everybody. The username is root, and the password is empty string. There we go. So let's connect here. Database.php. Connection successful. Ta-da! So, just to prove that it doesn't just say connection successful when it's not, I'm going to misspell the username and show you that it doesn't work. Instead of connecting with root, I will connect with schmoot. And we have invalid credentials. Very good. Any questions? You guys get that far? Yes?
When I don't have this right username or password, I just use basically what we do in either Java or C#. I just use the exception message. Is that fine? Like, or is that good practice?
You mean inside of the catch?
Yeah. So I would do like echo and then empty string concatenate $E and then get message.
Perfectly acceptable. Useful, in fact. I'm just trying to, like, you already talked about that in Java, so I just wanted to kind of skip over it.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, feel free to be as good a programmer as you actually are. You know, don't limit yourself to only that which I talked about in class. So now let us discuss the let's discuss that business with the CS Unix passwords. Okay? So, as it turns out, your CS Unix passwords are contained in a file inside of your CS Unix home directories. And if you know how to retrieve it, you can access your password quite easily. So, let's load up PuTTY, shall we? How many people have used PuTTY in like the last, used it once in JavaScript and then never used it again? How many people have never used it again after the first time you used it? So, that's a shame. It's a crying shame. So, PuTTY, please connect to your CS Unix accounts using PuTTY. csunix.mohawkcollege.ca, port 22. Open the connection. Ooh, can I actually do it so that the text is a bit larger? I wonder. Window appearance. Font settings. Change. There we go. Sorry, question?
Can I use files in it?
I think you can, yeah. csunix.mohawkcollege.ca. There we go. That's a bit better. Log in as my name, not Moose. My goodness. Do you know the reason that it you're typing your password but it doesn't show anything?
Show the link, because it won't show the link. It's like even more secure.
Exactly. The number of characters in your password is information about your password. So they don't even give you that. Right? So, here we are. We return to our friend the bash prompt. So, when you open up a connection to CS Unix, your working directory by default is the current, it's the home directory of your account, which fortunately is where the file we're looking for is. So I'm going to teach you just a couple of very basic commands. Alright. ls lists the contents of the current directory. So these are all of the files and folders in the current directory. You will notice that one of them is mysqlpassword.txt. Now, I don't recommend opening that file now. Do it in secret. Do it privately. Do not ever show your password in plain text to anyone. But this is how you would do it. Use cat, which stands for catalog. C-A-T, mysqlpassword.txt. If I were to press enter, everybody and the video recording would see my password.
Please.
Nope. I actually have admin level or elevated privilege levels on the CS Unix database. No, I'm not going to share my password. Does that make sense? All good? If you take a look inside of this folder a little more deeply at the hidden files and folders, you will see that there is also changemysqlpassword.ksh. That's a hidden script. My understanding is that IT has sufficient permission levels to execute that script, but we do not. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's administrator, group, and user. So I don't believe you actually have permission to execute the script and change your password. You'd have to go through IT if you want your password changed. But your password is in a plain text file. I have just shown you how to get to it. You should never be able to forget it now. Okay? Just don't delete the file, okay? By the way, if you wanted to delete the file, the command for that is rm for remove. Yeah, but don't. Or if you do, I'm sending you straight to IT. I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that?
What's the command to open a file in there again?
So there are two commands that you can use. Well, there are many, but there are two commands you can use. Cat views file contents, but it doesn't open it for modification. So, for example, if I were to cat args.sh, which is just a file I have hanging around, this is the contents of args.sh. This is just a little bash script that shows you how you get arguments out off of a bash script. So run args.sh, hello, how are you? There you go. Those are your args. Anyway, the other thing that you have, which I can't believe that CS Unix didn't have this before I arrived at this institution. There is a very helpful in-terminal editor called Nano, which you can use. Before it was just Vim. Has anybody ever used Vim before?
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it awful?
It's like, just like, I don't even know what it, like, why have it? I don't understand. I just don't know what, no
Vim
words, no
enthusiasts assert that Vim has a higher skill cap than other editors. I appreciate that chuckle from Jay. But if you, so basically the closest you're going to get to like Notepad or something similar is a program called Nano. This is Nano. Nano even does a little bit of like syntax highlighting for you, which is lovely, right? Try getting that in Vim.
Here's what they made Geo Vim though.
Yeah. And oh look, do you all have all of your important shortcut keys given? Yeah. So yeah, this is Nano. You can edit files in Nano. You can also view the files in Nano, but those are like your two basic commands for viewing and editing files directly once you're logged into the server in a shell session. You sell seashells by the
What was the
seashore.
command to open the nano thing?
Nano.
Is that?
Just Nano. Just type Nano and then the name of the file. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I got lost logging in. What was
Okay. So, if you use the ls command, that shows you the contents of the folder. You will see mysql password.txt. That is where your SQL password is stored. That's the one for your account. Okay? You can view it by using the command cat mysql password.txt. Tab autocompletion is the boss.
Maybe also just use a star.
Star?
Yeah, like anything that matches that.
Oh, like matching the glob pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. But, like, that's actually more key presses because you have to hold shift to get to star. Yeah. Also, it's a little more dangerous because you would get all files matching the pattern. You know? Like tab autocompletion is actually like, all I even have to hit is M and then I've got it.
I mean, someone would put them in there though.
Yeah.
Tim would like use the, I don't know. Just do M and then the star, it'll probably do the same thing.
Oh yeah, no, it certainly will. Yeah, and you're not tricking me into showing you my password.
Oh, okay, well, I don't have any.
Yeah. Okay. And the way that you exit is to use the command exit. Ta-da! So, all good? So now you know where your passwords are.
Where are they? No.
Just open up CS Unix and just go to your directory, that's it.
No, I was kidding.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Summary of it.
So, but it's your password, so protect it. So back to our PHP. So. We have connected to a database, but we haven't done anything with it. What is our most basic SQL query? What is the easiest one to do?
Select.
Select our working.
Yeah. Select star from table, right? So let's see if we can get a select query operating on our database whose connection is now open. So, DDO object works. You take a command, you have the database prepare that command, that produces a statement object. The statement object has another command to execute itself on the server. So preparing a statement is a bit like queuing up a command to be executed, right? Once you have executed it, you get a Boolean true or false value out of that, indicating success or failure. And any data that's returned is stored in the same statement object. So let's go through it. First, we need our command. CMD. Select star from video games. So far, so good. Next, we need to prepare the statement and retrieve the statement object. Statement object is equal to database, arrow, prepare, command. What's the arrow mean again?
It's the dot, right? It means the
Access to the
Yes. It is the equivalent of dot syntax in Java or JavaScript. Yes. This creates the statement object, which is the thing that you actually, like, this is the thing you use to actually send the query. All right? And this is how you do it. Statement, execute. There you go. Now, the return result of this is a Boolean indicating success or failure. The kind of, learner programmer way of doing this, which I think is superior actually, is to assign this value to a variable and then do an if statement based on success or failure of the operation. Quick question. Why might a statement fail?
Wrong parameter.
Wrong parameter? What were you going to say?
Invalid syntax.
Invalid syntax is a very big one. Most of the time it'll be invalid syntax. Invalid parameter might have been associated to that.
I just mean like might get confusing between all of those, like, what should I use the to do with?
Yeah. Any other ideas? What might happen to, yes? Maybe the table doesn't exist, yeah, so the SQL query is correct syntactically, but malformed in some other way, accessing something that doesn't exist, etc. Yes?
Now the data packet gets lost.
Sorry?
The data packet can get lost, being sent to the server.
Very good, yes. So this is mostly a problem when it's not just on localhost, obviously. But if you're having to connect to the SQL database through the internet, packets get lost, right? Connections get interrupted. Nodes go down. It happens, right? So, very good, very good. Any other questions? Okay. Wait, that wasn't a question. I had the question. Do you have any questions?
Any other answers?
Any other answers? That's right.
Google.
So I've shown you the way that makes sense and looks nice. Let me now show you the infuriating way that PHP people usually do it. They will tend to just plop statement execute inside of the if statement itself. Technically this is true. This works because it does return a Boolean true or false. So the if statement is satisfied. The reason that this is, like personally I find this slightly infuriating, is that it's an if statement Boolean expression with side effects, right? And perhaps I'm a bit persnickety, but I don't like it when Boolean expressions have side effects, right? Because you look at that and you're like, that is a guard. The only purpose of it is to control the if statement. But you'd be wrong. In this case, data may or may not be stored. The statement object may or may not be modified by this operation. So basically, you're using the if statement to execute a thing, right? I also find it like infuriating when people do stuff like that, right? You can validly do assignment inside of the guard to an if statement, right? The guard expression. But like, all you're doing is making the code more complicated for like people to read. And there's like, just use 2 more lines of code. Just use 2 more lines of code and it's all fine, you know?
Sir, you don't understand. I need to be able to brag about my code having less lines than other persons.
I understand.
Oh yeah, that's true.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding
I saw
around.
that thing online where
Yeah.
they're like comparing junior programmers with senior programmers, and senior programmers have like 2 lines of code, like what you're doing right now.
Yeah, but can I show you what the wrong way to do that is? Like this will still work.
As much as I hate Python, it's like indent stuff.
Right?
Doesn't it kind of
That works,
Yeah.
right?
See,
So
now you're just bragging that your monitor is like 32 inches at the very least. Like,
yeah. Actually, I think I missed one. There you go. There, look, I wrote my whole program on 1 line. You know? It's like, yeah, okay. It is true that there is a generally true correlation between having a lower number of lines of code and it being more efficient, right? That is true, but it shouldn't come at the expense of readability,
Yeah.
right? The other, like there are actual real advantages to writing fewer lines of code, or, you know, trying to write fewer lines of code. For one thing, every line of code that you write is a possible place there are bugs, right? If there are fewer lines of code in general, there are fewer places where bugs can hide. So it's easier to work with and maintain shorter code. And if the shorter if shorter code does the same thing as longer code, it's actually fine, right? If it does the same thing, it's fine. Oh man, I remember, not to derail us too badly on a tangent, but I remember I was teaching a C programming class at the university, and I had an assignment. I was teaching them about how to use like string operations in C, and like how to use things like printf and scanf properly, right? And I had this person, like I had a question in an assignment, and it was something about like formatting dates, like date strings. And I had this person come to me with their code and say, oh, I don't know what's going wrong in this code, can you help me? And I said, oh, I'll take a look at your code, because I always say I'll take a look at the code. My solution to that question was like 10 lines of code, right? And I was kind of writing it for readability, right? I could have probably crunched it down further, but like 10 lines of code was a good solution. That's what I would have expected the student to come up with. This person had, I kid you not, 190 lines of code, right? To do the same thing, and the reason they had that much code is they weren't using the libraries that we talked about in class. They were doing everything manually, reproducing all of that stuff, right? So basically, like, I said to him, listen, no bloody wonder you can't figure out what's wrong with it. Like, look at it, you know? This solution is supposed to be that big, you've made it this big, you know? Use the functions in class, this is a redo, basically. Which is an awful thing to say because you can imagine how much time that person spent writing 190 lines of code and how many hours they spent agonizing over it.
Programmers and-
I'm sure everybody's been there. But, like it's, like, sometimes in Java, I kind of get the impression people think that, like, the methods in Java are a little short, you know? It's like, once you actually crack open the method, it's not that long, you know? Especially the ones in the models, as opposed to the ones in the views. But it's like, that's what you want. That's your victory condition. If it's like 4 lines of code, how easy is that to debug? You know, as long as it's being called at the right times, like, you're laughing. That's the whole point of object-oriented programming, is to take these enormous 190-line C programs and break them up so that they can be understood easily, right? So, yeah. So that's my diatribe on trying to minimize code length. It's like, should you worry about it a lot, given that, like, you know, a lot of the people in this room have been programming for maybe like less than 2 years? Probably not. Like, you're still novices, most of you, right? But as you upskill, you'll find it sort of just naturally happens that your code becomes shorter over time. So, yeah. Anyway, where were we? Yes, PHP. So this is the infuriating way. I don't really care which way you use, but you know, I'm going to do it that way for clarity. Can you see this in the back? Good. So if our program is successful, we want to display the results to the screen. Otherwise, we want to say some sort of error message, like echo could not execute query. So, the way that you get data out of the statement object is as follows. Statement, arrow fetch, or, my preferred way, statement, arrow fetch all. So, select queries obviously can return more than one record, right? If you fetch, basically using fetch, this is fetch one entry at a time, very similar to like fgetS. The other one, fetch all, is similar to fread. It pulls the entire return result of the operation into whatever you're assigning it to. So I'm going to use fetch all, assign a variable data to the output, and we just require one more thing. Everybody remembers JSON decode? Everybody remembers the second parameter of JSON decode?
True.
Yes. What does that true mean?
Associated with.
Right. With fetch, we also need to tell it whether we're decoding it as an associative array or as an object. The way that you do that, PDO : fetch a sock, or fetch obj, based on whether you want an associative array or an object. I'm going to go with an associative array. So, does anybody remember what this thing is? Yes, it's a namespace thing. You're a C++ programmer, right? Yeah. So, double colon is scope resolution operator. So, the definition of fetch associative exists inside of the PDO object, or inside of its namespace. So, in order to access the fetch associative definition, we need to go through the PDO object to get there. And that's what the double colon is for. One of the reasons they do this is that this symbol, fetch associative, may be defined differently in different places. And you want to pull the correct definition of it, right? Because you guys want to know something? You want to know a little secret about how things work under the hood? Yes, thank you. These are all a thing called enumerations. Do you know what an enumeration is?
Yeah, we have something similar to C#.
Yeah, assign a name to a number is basically the idea, yeah. That's like how it works in the back end. If you want like a high-level concept for it, what you're basically doing is you're constructing a set, like in set theory terms. So like, for example, if you wanted values, like literal values for a bunch of colors, you could make a color type and have like red, blue, green, yellow as values that you can use in the program. My understanding is that like you guys aren't really taught enumerations at any point. Is that true? Yeah?
In C# there's something like IEnumerate.
Yeah.
There's like an actual interface for it.
Do you mind if we go through them reasonably quickly? It's a little bit of a tangent, but highly useful.
Please.
So, I mean, this is a class, right? It's like not on the docket of things to talk about today, but, you know, at some point you should hear about enumerations. You're in bloody programming diplomas, you know? So, here we go, folks. So, an enumeration, I'll start with the syntax, all right? So this is the C++ syntax for it. Most languages use this syntax or something close to it. So your keyword is enum. You then pick a type name. So for example, status, right? You then have, in curly braces, a list of symbols. I prefer to call them tokens because that's how the compiler thinks about them. But essentially what you are doing is defining a list of literal values. Strings without the quotes. Status can be, for example, what is it? Not these. No, it is PAR. Sleep, painted, frozen, or is it FedZen? And poison, and burn. There we go. There we go. So, those are all status conditions from the Pokemon video games. So, you can imagine that is actually how in the Pokemon games they, like in the original ones at least, that is likely what they did, right, for status conditions. Not, discounting the hidden status conditions like confusion and that sort of thing, which probably have their own thing, it's just hidden. You can now use this in things like C, C++, and Java as follows. Status x is equal to paralysis if x is equal to fainted, send in next Pokemon, etc. Right? So the difference here with enumerations, again, notice that there are no quotes. Right? These are not strings. These are literal tokens. Right? What is happening on the back end, inside of the compiler, is precisely what you said. Right? The compiler says, that is an alias for integer. These are aliases for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As a pre-compilation step, it runs through the program and replaces all occurrences of status with integer and any of these symbols with their corresponding numbers. So enumerations don't actually make it to compiled code. They are taken out during the compilation stage. But that's not terribly surprising. Variable names are the same way. Variable names don't actually get to your executable code. They are taken out during the compilation stage. So, yeah. So when you use things like filter validate int or filter sanitize special chars, these are all enumerations for particular, like those are all actually integers under the hood, right? And you can even tell that from the documentation. What's the data type on filter?
Thanks. Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
mixed because it might produce many different things, but you'll see that thing, somehow it is correct that that's an integer. And I'm telling you how, it's because it's an enumeration. Does that make sense? Any questions?
I just had a question for SQL. So when we're trying to sanitize our database, is there something specifically for the SQL, like filter sanitize database?
Absolutely. It's built into the PDO.
Okay.
That in theory, we are already doing it. But there's a particular way that you have to put data into the string. Basically, you have to not put the data into the string. You have to leave holes in the string, and then the execute method will put the data in for you in a way that's safe. Don't worry, we'll get there. Any questions about that? In case you're interested how enumerations work in PHP, since that's the particular language we're studying, this is how they look in PHP. As you can see, very similar to how they look in C. The only difference being we have case and semicolon instead of just a comma. But yeah, you're absolutely, I am happy for you to make enumerations. Please do. Just keep in mind that they will probably print as their integer values if you try to transfer them to the client. The enumeration is a definition inside of the PHP script itself, right? It's not going to transfer out to the client. So, 2 more points on this. Number 1, advantages over using just strings to do the same thing, right? Because the way that you would do this in Python would be to just have the variable be a string, right? And put the symbols that you want in the string, and there you go, right? Disadvantage of doing that, number one, speed. String comparison is very slow. Integer comparison is very fast. So, it is faster to work with an enumeration than it is to work with strings trying to do the same thing. Number two, the things that are in an enumeration are defined up front and cannot be modified as the code goes along. You can imagine a situation, right? Let's say that you're a programmer programming a Pokemon video game. You have your lovely set of statuses already perfectly defined, but you're using strings to represent them. And, your office rival is modifying the code and says to himself, you know what? I want to add a new status condition. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to assign a new string value. It's going to be BLD for blind, because that is a status condition in Final Fantasy, which is my favorite game. Yeah, or frog, even better.
What about
right?
Factorio?
Factorio doesn't have status conditions.
Well, yeah, but
I
mean, for the favorite game.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about this hypothetical bad programmer. I'm a much better programmer than that. So let's say you're on your side of the code, and suddenly like status values start coming to you. You're like, BLD. Why do I care if the Pokemon is blonde? And
What if he's bleeding?
or bleeding. That's another one.
I
It's
was
like
gonna say bald.
or bald, even better.
I was thinking bald. I was like, wait, what?
There you go.
I kinda got
Yeah. Oh
With
man.
Pikachu's bald.
Bald is a status. Oh, but you could imagine they'd make a Pokemon for that, like a hairdresser Pokemon or something.
Oh god.
Yeah. There you go. Can you imagine the work it would be to make like separate models for every bald Pokemon? Anyway,
Surely they just take they just have it remove the hair next to whatever.
no, this is what I would do, right? I would just give it a bald cap. Right? But anyway,
But,
yes.
yeah, sorry, I just had a quick question. So are status conditions kind of like state machines? Because I know in games there's like, instead of doing a bunch of if statements, you have a state machine that's like, okay, if I'm gonna eat this food, then I'm gonna have to pick it up, which is a state, eat it, which is a state, and then the hunger would rise, part of that state. And then
You can use them like that, but a state machine is a completely different concept. State machines are actually an alternative model of computation to what we do, von Neumann architecture. It's actually a bit more similar to how electronic circuitry works. Give me 1 moment to answer that question, because it's a very interesting one. So, for example, if you wanted to have a state machine for something like a traffic light, right? You would have, red, yellow, and green, right? And you would have transitions between these states. Green turns to yellow, yellow turns to red, red turns to green, right? And you would have conditions that controlled the changing of these states. Maybe you get a timeout of, 300 seconds, about 5 minutes, to go from green to yellow. The yellow light lasts 20 seconds, right? And then the red light lasts also 300 seconds, or something like that, right? So you would have, with a state machine, how it works is you have a state that you consider active. This is the state I'm in, and then these, this is a very simple one. You can have an arbitrary number of transitions out of or into a state, right? But that's what a state machine is. That's a different thing entirely. But these are also extremely useful. As I said, like many systems in electronics and other sorts of things, you will use state machines. Another, in software context for state machines is animation controllers are often state machines.
Yeah, like I was doing that for a game actually.
Yeah, state machines, interesting topic, but not in this course, really, unfortunately. So, any questions about, oh, wait, I have one more comment about enumerations, which is kind of interesting. In C, and therefore also in C++, true and false are enumerations. Like the literal values true and false map to 1 and 0, right? In this manner, it's just an enumeration.
Would that not be true for all languages?
So,
How would it work in Java, for example?
ultimately, the reason that C does that is because that's the way the CPU does it,
Right.
right? So when the CPU, in the CPU, we do not keep full, addresses in memory just for 1 bit, right? It's actually physically impossible. The lowest level that memory is addressed at is bytes, right? So
8 bits.
8 bits, yeah. So, every cell in memory has a single memory address, right? Those memory addresses each contain 8 bits, right? So, you can't just pull 1 bit into the CPU, right? But once you have pulled a variable in, the question is, how does something like Boolean AND work, right? So the way the CPU considers it, 0 means false. Anything that's not 0 means true. That includes things that you would consider negative integers, positive integers, any non-zero value. So, hold on, is that a bald Pokemon? Oh man, that's great. That's, I mean, yeah, no, but it's got great, great cursed image energy. Yeah.
You could have posted that on Twitter.
You have to share it with the class now.
You could have posted,
up for the class?
you could have
There you go.
posted it on Twitter 5
There you
years
go.
ago, and that
Bald
would have
Pokemon.
been a hit.
Oof. There we go. Thank you for that contribution.
Good.
So, so that's how things work under the hood. Continuing on with databases. So, we should actually execute this to see if it's working, but first we need to show the data. So, echo, and I think I'm going to do it a little bit nicely and take time. For each data as entry, so when you use fetch all, you get a list of associative arrays, right? So you'll get a number of entries from the database. These are all associative arrays. It packages them up in a list for you. Echo JSON encode entry, and let's staple a break to the end there. There we go. Shall we see if it works? Data from the database. Now coming to you live from your webpage.
Yo, you guys had fighting game plays in your last time.
Yeah, they really liked fighting games.
I think Bloodborne was on the PS4 because
Buddy.
This is possible. Um, so, we have our data. Very good. Any questions? Did everybody kind of get that working? Is that good? No? You need me to take a look? Anybody? Oh, I'll show the code, yeah. So, while people are taking a look at the code. So now, our goal, now that we've retrieved data, our goal should be to create data, right? We've done the R in CRUD, now we're doing the C in CRUD. So, we now, thank you. We're now to the point where we need to take information from the client. Very thank you for that, done. And we need to integrate information from the client into an SQL query in order to retrieve some specific information from the server. Now, here be dragons. Alright? So, SQL injection attacks are a very big and important problem. Did we talk about them in the last class? No?
I don't think so.
Not really? I probably mentioned them, but just to give you some context for how bad SQL injection attacks are, usually when you hear in the news that there's been a big data breach, that's normally an SQL injection attack, right?
I was gonna say, I heard that, like, if you add in commas and stuff to your password, that it might mess up like the whole data set when the database.
Not
I don't know
if it's been properly filtered. If that's the case, if I had a website where somebody entering a comma or any character I didn't expect into the password field caused a problem, I would think very carefully about my filtering.
To the database that the people steal.
Yeah, well, you can think about it. If you splice a comma, like imagine you're doing an insert command, right? Insert into table credentials, values, the password you entered, and then the password contains a comma. If that comma gets interpreted as a comma, then you now have 3 arguments instead of 2, right?
Yeah.
How does the database work with that? Perhaps it just rejects it. But you have done something very bad. You have managed to get characters that shouldn't be there into an SQL query. That is the origin of the SQL injection attack. You just use something a little bit more damaging than a comma, right? So, a number of years ago, I think 10 or 15 years ago, the PlayStation network was hit, and people lost credit card information, right? That was an SQL injection attack. More recently, are you guys familiar with the website 23andMe?
What the heck? 23andMe?
Yes. So 23andMe is a website where they mail you a vial, you spit into the vial, then mail it back to them, and they sequence your genome, and then they tell you who you're related to. Personally, I probably don't need to know who I'm related to. I have enough German blood. I probably don't need to know. No, it's okay. They were Mennonites. They left the country centuries before the problem they had in the 20th century. So, yeah, I still probably don't need to know who I'm related to. So, if you consider your genome to be private information which I think is actually legally the case. Your genome is like copyright you. I think that's like legislation somewhere. That's a pretty significant breach, you know. I can't really, like, personally, I can't really think of why anybody would want, like, you know, 100,000 people's genes, you know? Who knows? Nefarious research.
Yeah.
I could imagine a Bond villain wanting it, you know? But, you know, short of having a genetics lab where you could clone people, I don't really know why you would want that. But.
I think it's a scary thing because, like, if they can, like, purely hypothetical, but if they can, like, use that information and find certain behaviors are more likely to occur based on certain things, and actually, like, it'll cause insurance to go up for certain people, which just isn't fair.
Oh, yeah, no, like,
And
yeah, there are plenty of ethical
Like,
problems
it's like,
in genetic
we
research.
shouldn't know this stuff.
Personally, I kind of questioned the wisdom of signing up for such a service in the first place, because, like, you know that what they're doing is they're just collecting the data.
Yeah, it's
You
like,
know,
they should pay me.
And it's like, exactly, it's like you have to, I think you had to pay like several $100s for them to sequence your genome back in the day, you know? And they still get your data. But, so that was one case. That was a little bit worrying. I think, like, the CRA's been hit before, or something like that.
It was Equifax that was.
Yeah, but there was one that's like even better. It's like your perfect, absolute perfect textbook example of, like, first of all, why you should just avoid certain behaviors on the internet, and two, perfect SQL attack. Has anybody in the room heard of a website called Ashley Madison? Yeah. So what's this website about?
Who is that?
Yes.
It's about cheating on your spouse.
It's about cheating on your spouse. Yes, it's a dating website for married people.
What?
Yes, Ashley Madison is a website that exists. It's for,
You'd think we'd have flying cars in 2024.
yeah,
This was
Right?
like
You just want to root
20.
society.
I want my moon base,
Yeah.
but these programmers are making things like that. Like, where's my moon base? You know? But,
Don't care about the,
or,
don't
yeah.
care about the money.
It's like, so anyway,
Ashley Madison.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, like, you know, the levels of degeneracy in our current society aside that such a website would exist, right? You can imagine that data in that database, pretty valuable to a hacker, right? Pretty valuable to a criminal, because, you know, as blackmail things go, it's like the classic example of what you would blackmail somebody with, you know? So, a couple of years ago, guess what happened? Somebody cracked the database. It wouldn't surprise me if that, like, actually shut down the website over time, but, you know, perhaps it doesn't exist anymore. Are you on it right now? Did they survive? Oh my goodness.
Life is short, having a
So, I'm sure they fixed the problem, right? Whatever caused the SQL injection attack, I'm sure they fixed it. But, like, maybe be careful about what data you put out on the internet, folks.
They kind of cheated on their security practices.
Yeah, well, imagine that. You know, there's a line from somewhere, people who are faithful in the small things will be faithful in the big things. I guess if you're unfaithful in the big things, you'll also be unfaithful in the small things by corollary. But yeah, so Ashley Madison, a database full of cheaters, a hacker got in, broke it open, right? Blackmailed a bunch of people, I'm sure. But I'm sure a lot of people had to come clean, and a bunch of marriages broke up. You know, so
That could actually potentially ruin a country if it was like the president on there. It's just like, wait a minute, what? You just keep.
yes,
Actually, some background on it. It was a group of hackers that
Oh.
were opposed morally because of the website, and
oh,
they wanted them to shut it down, or they were going to leak all of everybody's information. They like the people who run the website called their bluff, and then they released everything. And then it also got exposed that the website was creating fake female accounts to to screw over all the guys who tried cheating on their wives. So they were just talking to bots.
That's also a thing that like non-cheating dating websites do.
Yeah, they get low.
Yo, she knows too much. I think she was part of the attack.
No.
Like,
Yeah.
she knows
I
behind the
fell
scenes.
down this
like,
rabbit hole for a month.
she knew every problem they faced trying to get the information.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Ethical hacking. There's some ethical hacking for you.
Hacking, as we call it.
Yeah. Anyway, so SQL injection attacks. Fun. Since we're on the subject, you want to see how one works? I do not advocate crime. I am not teaching this in order that people may perform crime. I am teaching this so that people can defend against criminals. But let's see how to hack a SQL database, shall we? So, ooh, that might be my marker. You work. You do work. Ooh, nice. So, let's imagine we have an SQL query. All right? Something like the following. Command is equal to, shall we say, select, select star from credentials where password is equal to how does it go again? Password word. Oh, goodness me. Anticlimactic, I know. Sorry.
ABC.
Pass. No, like the idea is you're providing a variable that's being spliced into the string. This is actually critically important. And user is equal to user. Let's imagine that whoever put this together is a almost criminally a dummy and did no filtering whatsoever. All right? Might even just drop the get parameters right in there, because of course, why would they use post, right? So let's consider how this string gets spliced with password, or, well, let's pick user, with user having various values, right? So if user, the variable user, is equal to, Banjo's 38, typical username, right? What that becomes, I'm not going to rewrite the whole thing each time, but we get and user is equal to Band, yeah, I know. Did you see Banjo 2 got released for the Switch Online?
Yeah, I never actually finished doing it.
Microsoft's spending a bunch of money to buy Rare, only to, I think.
Ultimately fail. Yeah.
Only to never use any of their IPs.
That's another topic of discussion for another time. Actually, you know what they did with them?
Apparently they thought they were buying it to get Donkey Kong, and then they found out it wasn't even
Yeah.
there.
They actually took the Rare team and they made them make the Avatar system on the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
What an insult.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah. So,
Like,
if you have a regular username, splices in as normal, right? Let's try something a little different. What happens if this string contains a quote character? We get a quote, quote. That seems like that shouldn't happen. What if I throw a semicolon in there? I get a semicolon, quote, semicolon. Now, this is going to end up as a malformed query, right? Which is, you know, fair enough. So, you guys know what the comment character is in SQL? Dash dash. So what if we make our attack string something a little like that? The rest of the line will be ignored. So we have been able to encode right here. That is a rare squiggle of terrible and rare awfulness. There we go. We've managed to encode the end of the SQL query into the string that's being passed from the client. Who do we never trust? The client, that's right. So let's imagine we do something a little bit like this. Shall we splice that one in? I think double equals still works. I think in SQL it's optional, right? You can use single equals or double equals. I'm pretty sure that works. Is it single? Okay, I'll change it then. There we go. What does 1 equal to 1 evaluate to?
True.
Every time. What does anything or true equal to?
True.
Every time. So what does this mean? What am I doing? I'm tricking the login check. Right? This query, the way that this would be used by you, the unsuspecting dupe in PHP, you would see if you had a single entry returned from this query. If so, oh look, my credentials matched in the database, so I should validate the user. So you would be looking for, do I get something from this or do I get nothing from this? Right? If that's all you're looking for, this will certainly return you something. You will get every entry in the database. Right? Well, you'll definitely get more than one. Right? So, if your PHP code has been so written that all it's looking for is for the set of matching credentials to be non-zero, this query will fake through your login check. You don't need to know the username. You don't need to know the password. Hooray! SQL injection attack. Pausing for a moment for that one to sink in. Any questions? Yeah.
I'm assuming you just filter that the same way you filter for post and get as well, with the special jars?
In general, yes. So the mechanism for defending against this type of thing is simply not to allow these control characters, which, you know, there's no reason that your password should contain comment characters, right? Although
Also slash and asterisk work, or slash and star slash is another comment.
Yeah, sure. But you should be probably using none of those, particularly slashes. Slashes are particularly problematic. Although I'm pretty sure asterisk is considered a legal password character, right? So here's a question. Is hyphen a legal password character?
Yeah, but they put like the character.
It's just an email control.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's a little bit more complicated than it seems, because many of it, like, it depends on the website, right? Some websites will have like a more restrictive set of symbols than is this quick Google search has revealed. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a website that allows, like, you know, semicolon, for instance. That might be the case. Yeah, okay. All right, well, I guess if Western Michigan University is allowing these symbols in their passwords, then there you have it. So it's not just checking for symbols, it's checking for combinations of symbols, which mean valid things in SQL, right? So the way that you guard against this stuff is a bit complicated. It's not just as simple as disallowing the control characters, right? That's why you shouldn't do it yourself. You should use the PDO, right? So, here's one for you. I want to take that feeling and transfer it to everybody else in the room, right? This should give you that queasy feeling in your tailbone, like when you're going down a roller coaster, right? Drop table credentials. If your PHP has been so configured that it will execute multiple statements at once, then you have just given anybody who manages to perform an SQL injection attack, they can just write statements, right? Which, you know, like if this were a castle, you might as well like throw down the drawbridge and put up a big neon sign that said "Loot to plunder," you know? So, any questions about the principles behind SQL injection attacks? Did you know that PHP is credited with the invention of the SQL injection attack? I may have mentioned this in class before, but the fact that in PHP you can splice strings into other strings this easily leads to lazy habits about sanitization, which is how you end up with these types of problems in the first place. So, any questions? No? Shall we move on? All right. So, again, please do not use your powers for evil. I'm charging each of you now, right now in this room, nobody is allowed to be evil. All right? I want everybody, raise your hand, say, come on, raise your hands. Thank you. I solemnly swear to not be evil.
I smell
And this is going to be calculated.
I was thinking backwards.
So let me show you how to splice something into a query properly so that you don't end up with an SQL injection attack. When you formulate your command, insert into video games, name, system, and ranking. There we go. Values. The bad way of doing it is to put your, I know we haven't set up the form. I don't have time for the rest of the class to set up the form. Just pretend that the variables exist. If you just splice in your variables like this, even if you are using the PDO, this will still result in an SQL injection attack vulnerability because you have not let the PDO do its job. You are attempting to do its job for it. You are manually splicing the string. Do not manually splice the string. That is the main thing. Do not manually splice the string. Okay? So, what you do, you remove any variables you put in there and replace them with check marks. And you also take a rolled up newspaper and you hit yourself in the back of the head every time you have the impulse to put a variable raw into a SQL string. You put in question marks. The execute command scans for these question marks and inserts into them the values that you pass in. So, the argument of execute becomes n system rating, like that. You pass the data that you want spliced in into the execute method, and then execute scans through the string looking for these question marks and puts the data in safely. Safely. Alright? So, XSS attacks mainly occur through JavaScript. So, protecting against them requires filtering out JavaScript control characters. Passwords, right? Passwords. When you are writing an SQL query, SQL is a different language from JavaScript. Some of you may have noticed that. It has a different set of control characters, right? Therefore, when you are filtering, you do both, right? They are overlapping, but not, like the set of control characters for those two languages overlap to a significant degree, but they are not the same. So you must filter at both steps. Alright? Plus, if passwords containing a particular character don't work, drop the character. Right? If it's a character that your filters don't like, it's okay for you to be as restrictive of the special characters you permit inside of your passwords as you like. The penalty you are paying for that is password complexity. Right? The space of possible passwords gets smaller every time you exclude a special character. But it is much better to have less complex passwords if it means that you're not directly open to SQL or other forms of code injection attack. Does that make sense? So, if you didn't get this from the previous example on the board, these strings, you just enter them into the web form. that's all it takes. Right? Like I wouldn't have to do anything particularly fancy to get these into the server. At some point when we've worked up the example a little bit further, I'll do an example where I show you an SQL injection attack. But, you know, I'll attack my own code, as it were. But, yeah. Any questions? Cool. I can't really get this example working in the 4 minutes that we have remaining in class, so I think I'm going to dismiss class a little bit early today. That's it. Thank you. Please come next week. See you next week.
Coach. Coach.
Code, yeah, I'll post the code.
Thank you.